Left off, we're about to get into 1938, which is when stuff gets genuinely nasty. But before I do, wanted to talk about, come back, a major turning point, which was when Pilsudski, who was called just the father of enlightenment, of Jewish enlightenment and Polish independence. He really wanted Poland to be multi-ethnic. He also has incredible facial hair. I mean, I kind of want to touch it. I don't, but I do. So he died just naturally, and then the guy waiting in the wings was this super duper racist anti-Semite guy, and so you start to see everything hit the fan pretty quickly, and a lot of that idyllic egalitarianism that allowed so many Jews to just live these prosperous lives, allowed the Zeidelbergs to make their millions. You saw it quickly begin to unravel. And so there were a lot of reasons that people started to target Jews. And of course, we know anti-Semitism is very old, and it's not a new ideology. It's not like it was invented here, but there were some specific things that caused tension between the ethnic Poles and the Jews. One was that there were a lot of people, a lot of Jews who were relaxing a lot of the earlier assimilation laws, stuff they were used to when Russia basically owned Poland. And so that meant, yeah, they could have long beards. They could wear a lot of their Hasidic garments, and 80% of Jews looked Jewish. You add in whatever that means, but they were obviously recognizable as Jewish. And so there did start to be a lot of that old school us and them of like, well, are you Polish or are you Jewish? You do not seem to want to be Polish. And so a lot of uber nationalistic language was popping up. There's also just that right-wing movement that the guy waiting in the wings for the good guy was stirring up. And we know from history just how easy it is to get people into a very racist space quickly, just through whatever rhetoric is disseminated. So we're kind of sheep with that unless we're critically thinking. And so a lot of the propaganda started to pop up, and a lot of it was related to their looks. And so again, dividing these very grotesque figures, supposed to make them a little less human, a little more villainous, even if they're not saying that they're necessarily bad, but there were these villainistic qualities. So this is from a Polish newspaper. One of the accusations was that they were these secret Bolshevists. So they were actually communists. They were supporters of Russia, because they were this other, and because many of them had roots. Many of the Jewish families had roots in Russia because Russia had literally taken them over. So it was kind of this ironic situation. At the same time, they also were bashing them as being like capitalist sort of slaves, and that they're just trying to get money out of everyone. So that's another irony of they're calling them Bolshevists, which would be communists, but also saying that they're capitalists. So this isn't quite making sense. But this image of like, you're stabbing us in the back, you're stabbing Poland in the back, we've been your home for so long, and you're stabbing us in the back, which a lot of it reminds me of the kind of language that we use of, if you're going to be here, you need to actually be an American. And there was a lot of like, you need to stop speaking Yiddish. And 87% of the Jewish population claimed Yiddish as their official language, and the Poles did not like that. That also led to like, well, are you Jewish or are you Polish? Go back to your side. Of course, there was no place for them to go because they had lived in Poland forever. So all these things are connected. History repeats itself, and we don't seem to learn as a peoples. Anyway, a lot of these posters were sort of showing a threat to Polish life, that Jews wanted to change that. Another is the age-old, ridiculous accusation surrounding sort of the mysticism of Judaism, that it's called blood libel, and basically it's people accusing Jews of kidnapping their children and using their children's like Christian babies' blood for their sacrifices and their rituals. It's absurd, but it's not the only place to use that. Several countries throughout time have used that. So a lot of it is just that fear of the unknown, and what can happen when we lash out at people who don't share the same faith in many cases. And some things that happened simultaneously. So we're going to talk more about the ghettos on Thursday as we actually see some of the mobilization and the relocation actions and announcements. But the more that people lost their income, the more that businesses were targeted and that their standard of living dropped, the more Jews began to be associated with filth and dirt. And it's not saying that all Jews lived in filth. That's not the case at all. They didn't, not until they were forced to live in horrific ghettos, which we'll see later. But all you have to do is suggest that Jews are carrying typhus, and people don't want to do business with them. So naturally, their businesses will shut down because they're losing their Polish customers. And we see this stuff all over Europe, demonizing and as being dirty or carriers of a disease. Just gonna, I'll just put it out there. Something that made me angry last night is that they're speeding up the border construction of the border wall because someone in the Trump said that the Mexicans, quote unquote, are bringing more coronavirus to us, regardless of the fact that we have the most cases out of anybody, and there's not quite as many in Mexico. But I'm just going to put that out there, that this stuff is all connected. The way we talk about immigrant groups, the way we talk about other ethnic groups, religious groups, it's all connected, and it's sad, and this is why we need Jesus. It's important to note that this was Poles. Poles were doing this to Jews. The Nazis were not a part of anything yet, and so I think that this image from Maus is powerful and helpful for understanding this until they went to the sanitarium in Czechoslovakia, which was already overtaken by Nazis. That was the first time they saw the swastika. That was the first time that they started to realize what was going on. That hadn't happened in Poland yet. They'd not invaded Poland yet. And so that'll be later. Another thing they did in 1935, pretty much directly after that one dude died, was create ghetto benches. So for in universities, basically they could only have like 7% Jews in universities, and so limiting people. And then you'd have special stamps in your books to show that you were. It's the one in the upper left hand corner to show that you were a Jew. And so a lot of people just couldn't get an education despite whatever qualifications, because in that wonderful interwar period, so many Jews were going to schools, were becoming educated. And so there was a mass exodus around now of families who did have the means to go to the U.S. so that their children could be educated, or they could be educated. So one of many just waves of immigration. And of course, we're very familiar with the destruction of shops. Mentioned before, it was a way to take away their livelihood, to put them in poverty, even though people were told not to loot, just destroy, which, I mean, almost seems worse because it's just hurting and not taking. But they did it under the guise of Christian shops. We want to support Christian shops, and so anyone who is in a Christian shop should be destroyed. This was even more difficult because they were going through a Great Depression too, and so there just wasn't the means to rebuild. And so in our text, you did see Andrej's father rebuild the company and come back stronger, keeping in mind that he had a whole lot more money. There's sort of a hint of that when they're talking about Germany, but that hadn't happened yet. And so the big moment in 1938 was Kristallnacht, which means like night of crystal or night of glass, when Nazis and Germans went through Berlin and Munich, I think it was Munich, and just destroyed all of the Jewish shops. And so this didn't happen in Poland, but we see the trickle down. So whatever's happening in Germany gradually trickles into the treatment of Poland. We're almost there. 1939. That's the year. That's the year that we end at. Important to note, the Russia didn't really want Poland. They wanted the USSR. Like, they wanted the big guy. That was the whole reason they were there. And their whole goal was just to like blitzkrieg through. So if you remember from U.S. history, blitzkrieg is just that notorious Nazi method of destruction of there's really not whole lot of strategy. You just are just destroying everything in your path with a lot of machinery, things like that. Um, and It helps to go back to World War II really, really quickly, and I promise we're almost done. I just noticed that whoever made this map misspelled Sweden as Sweden, which is very cute. World War One completely reshaped borders. It made Europe into something different in the same way that World War II did as well. So it's kind of hard to read here, but Germany used to be this guy. And so you can see there's a little area that's shaded in over here. And so a lot of people thought, oh, yeah, they want to invade. We're seeing aggression against the border. They must just want that area back. And that's what Vladek thought as well. He said, we thought then that Hitler wanted only the parts from Poland, like Bielsko, what used to be parts from Germany before the First World War. They were wrong. They wanted Russia. And so the U.S. and most Allied forces were like, all right, well, let them figure it out. Like, it'd be great if they would just sort of take care of Russia at the same time. Like, don't invade Poland. If you do, like, we're going to go to war. France and Britain decided, like, yeah, if they take Poland, we are going to war. But nobody really thought it would happen, especially because Poland had a pretty good army. Like, they had 1.3 million and there were 1.5 million Nazis, so seemed okay. And they just figured that they're going to try to get through and go around and then just get to the USSR, that they didn't really want Poland. Well, they got really freaked out. Wait, let me go back real quick. Really freaked out when in August they signed a non-aggression pact. So that's Stalin right there. So Germany and the USSR were like, yeah, we want to attack each other. So everyone went back to the map and was like, oh no, what is it exactly that they want? So on September 1st, which is a super important date, there were 3,474,000 Jews within Poland. And so that was the start of the 1939 September campaign, which is where we see Vladek. That is the war that he is fighting. And so Poles and Jews really put their differences aside and fought together, which it would have been a fair fight. And the U.S. and Allied forces thought that was a pretty good fight. And they thought, yeah, they have a fighting chance of getting them. Of stopping them from moving through the country. And that did not happen. They were woefully unprepared, which we kind of see when Vladek only has like 3 or 8 days of preparation or something like that. They didn't fully understand what the Nazi party, what the Third Reich really was. There were like 36,000 armored vehicles that the Nazi party had to 750. The machinery was just so much, and that's really what overwhelmed them. Twice as many airplanes. And within just about a couple weeks, because Krakow fell on, what day was that? It was like the 29th. So within a month, Poland was gone. 20,000 Jewish civilians died, 32,216 Jewish soldiers died, and then there were 61,000 Jews that went into these labor camps where we see Vladek, these prisoner of war camps, which are really the precursors of those concentration camps, because those haven't quite been built. I think there might have been the final question hadn't really come up yet. But we see the same stuff happening in those labor camps as eventually happening in concentration camps. And then it looks like this. There is no Poland. There is just the Third Reich and the USSR by 1940, which is where we will pick up again. I wanted to end. Am I ending on this? Yeah, almost. I want to end on this. I know this has been long, but this is one of the areas that's a little bit complicated, basically what they did with Poland. And so he provides this little bit of a map. But this whole area, it was basically Germany. They just called it Germany. This area, the protectorate, was sort of this weird interland. It's still technically... It has like a Polish government, but it's just the Germans who are running it. It's not actually real. And then this area is just Russia. And so this is where Vladek wanted to go, and he didn't understand why he couldn't be let out there. But here's the first area where we see like, no, there are no Jews in in Germany. We will not have it. They considered this Germany. They did not want Jews in there. They made them go over to this protectorate area, and then he had to sneak back in to find his family. But that's some foreshadowing of like, oh, eventually that line is gonna move as this becomes more of Germany to them. That means that they're gonna gradually annex the people as well. So just a look ahead, because I like maps. This happened, but the USSR actually fought back pretty well. As you remember, the USSR did kind of help us win the war, which is interesting. At least or they did release a lot of the concentration camps, but you can see that the German, the Third Reich is shrinking because they're getting really weak by 1944, very, very weak. In 1945, Poland pops back, hooray. And then the map that we're used to today looks like that.